Nostalgia. It's a term that's both heavily used and heavily criticized as overused by gamers everywhere. Say what you want about how nostalgia affects people's opinions of old games, you can't deny or downplay just how wonderful and fuzzy of a feeling it is. And you also can't deny that music is the biggest trigger of the feeling of nostalgia. And these are my top 5 nostalgic video game music tracks. Just to clarify, these are not my top 5 favorite nostalgic tracks, as there are other songs from the games or series on this list that I personally enjoy more. These tracks are simply the music tracks that make me feel the most nostalgic and put a specific memory or image into my head. For the record, I was born in 1995, so I'm very much an early to mid-2000s kid, and I grew up playing games from this era. Anyways, here we go. The main theme from Pac-Man World 2. I don't have much to say about this one, which is why I put it in 5th place, but anyone who has played this game knows and loves this theme. Pac-Man World 2 was my first Pac-Man World game, and I remember it quite fondly. This game brings back memories of aimlessly wandering around Pac Village, trying to get on top of some of the tallest buildings in order to get the tokens and goodies on top so I could unlock more and more games in the arcade, which I also spent a lot of time in. At the same time, this theme also perfectly represents the game as a whole. It's a good, classic, fun collectathon, and is still one of my favorite games in the genre. If you haven't played this game but enjoy 3D platformers, I highly recommend it. Windy and Ripley from Sonic Adventure. Sonic Adventure was my first 3D Sonic game and my first GameCube game. From when I was 3 all the way up to when I was 7, my only system was a Sega Genesis, and I had all the main Sonic games on that system, including 3D Blast. However, the GameCube was my main gaming console growing up, so this was the start of an era for me. I also played a lot of computer games too. Out of all the songs in the game, this one just hits home for me. It's not the more famous and probably more memorable Azure Blue World, which is from the first part of the level, which is what most people would probably pick for their top nostalgic track from this game because of it being the first music track you hear in an action stage in this game, and it also accompanies the famous whale chase segment. Rather, this is from the second part of the level. I can't really explain why this track in particular brings back the most memories for me, but then again, can you really explain why certain things are more nostalgic than others? This track conjures in my head images of what you're seeing on screen right now, and makes me think of my wild, expansive imagination from when I was 8 years old playing this game obsessively for thousands of hours over time. Rogueport from Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. As you could probably tell from early videos on my channel complaining about Paper Mario Color Splash, or from my numerous comments and tweets, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is, to this day, still my favorite game of all time. It was the first RPG-esque game I really got into, and it made me a lover of the long, story-heavy JRPG genre that I am today. Now this game is only partially JRPG, and the story isn't really all that heavy, and I can think of better examples in the genre overall, such as Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2. However, there's just something about the perfect blend of non-obtrusive but involved story, an excellent leveling and equipment system, and of course the music that makes this game truly something special. I've played through it in its entirety many times now, and each time I hear this track you are hearing right now, I just immediately think of being 9 years old again, my imagination running wild, exploring every nook and cranny of this game's world, wanting to see what comes next. Rogueport is such an excellent hub, and it perfectly fits this game to a T. It shows you that this isn't your average cheerful basic Mario game. You're not in the Mushroom Kingdom anymore, so prepare for something much darker and more involved, and oh boy, did we all love it. Route 104 from Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. I was a bit of a late bloomer to the Pokemon series. I didn't play any Pokemon game at all until I was 10. I ended up playing a bit of Pokemon Ruby when my friend at the time brought her Game Boy Advance over in some games, and I was entranced. I wanted it for myself. She was a bit of an expert on this series, so she suggested Pokemon Emerald because it combined the best parts of Ruby and Sapphire and then some. Well, a month later on my 10th birthday, I ended up getting it as a gift, and I haven't looked back since. I'm not some big Pokemon fan, and I only consider myself a casual player, but Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald were special. Many fans of the series still see Hoenn as the best region in the series, and I can see why. It's less linear than the other regions in the series, has a huge variety of landscapes and interesting locations all over it. As for why I chose this track, well, it's the first route in the game outside of the tutorial area, and it symbolizes the true start of your adventure. And for me, it symbolizes the beginning of my long history of being a Pokemon fan, even if I'm a casual. Hearing this track makes me think of Hoenn as a whole and just how much fun it was to wander around, train my team, find rare Pokemon, trade with friends at school, and build the ultimate secret base. It also just makes me appreciate this game as a whole for being such an amazing introduction to the series for me. As for why I'm using the version from the 2014 remakes, well, it's because it simply sounds better than the Game Boy Advance version, and I get just as much nostalgia from this version as I do from the original. Bet this one surprised you, didn't it? The old version of Harmony from RuneScape. Man, where do I even begin? I guess I should start with an explanation. This is the old MIDI version of Harmony. See, RuneScape 2 first came out in 2004 and had a soundtrack composed by the absolutely brilliant Ian Taylor from Jagex. It started with regular MIDI files, which you're currently hearing. Eventually they switched to their own in-house sound engine that sounded slightly different, and then they eventually switched to the fully orchestrated and live recorded music you hear today in RuneScape 3. I started playing RuneScape in October of 2005 when I had just turned 10 years old about a month earlier, and I was in 5th grade at the time. At this time, the game still had the original MIDI music and the original RuneScape 2 interface, which is so old I couldn't even find a picture of it online. This was so long ago that the old school version of the game that you're seeing on screen right now uses the music and interface that came out in mid-2006 that I'm pretty sure was released alongside Recipe for Disaster, which was the very first special difficulty quest in the game. This is old school compared to old school. Harmony plays in Lumbridge, which is the town you're teleported to after you finish Tutorial Island, so this song to me immediately makes me think of my first time exploring this town, during my first play session of the game. I distinctly remember the low-res gray bricks and red roofs of the buildings, seeing the ducks floating in the water, and not wanting to cross the first bridge because I was scared that the goblins on the other side would attack me and kill me, and also being too scared to shut off the game because I was worried that I'd lose my progress as there was no manual save function in the game. This was my first MMO after all. Once I got into the hang of the game, I built so many memories. I was hopelessly addicted to this game from the day I started playing it all the way to about early 2007 or so, just before they made the trade changes. I then picked up the game again a few years later in May of 2009 and once again became hopelessly addicted until about early 2010. And since then, I usually once a year or so buy about 1 or 2 months of membership and play for a bit just to see where the game's going. So this game has been a big part of my life, and the account you see on screen is the same one that I signed up with and was playing on when I first heard this song and first made the memories that I just described above. But not only is this the #1 most nostalgic video game song on my list because of the 13 plus years of memories I built playing the game, or the fact that it immediately makes me think of specific images of day 1 of said 13 years, but it's also #1 on my list because nobody will ever be able to have this specific experience again. See, you can still officially play the old school version of the game, which, again, you have been looking at this whole time. However, there is no officially released version of this game that still has this version of Harmony in it. So, unlike every other game on this list, I will never be able to start up the game, hear this version of the song again, see the original RuneScape 2 interface, and play to my heart's content. The only way to hear this version of Harmony is to look it up on YouTube or find the old MIDI file online. This visual and auditory experience will forever exist in my memories and only in my memories. Just like remembering your elementary, middle, and high school years and never being able to relive them, no matter how badly you want to occasionally, I remember this classic version of the game I learned all about it in and will never be able to experience it again. That is why, out of my 5 choices, this easily, hands down, deserves the #1 spot. So what do you guys think? What are your most nostalgic video game tracks? I limited this list to 1 music track per series, but I can make a list 10 times this size if I was able to muse multiple tracks from each series or even each game. Sound off in the comments and let me know your age in addition to your most nostalgic video game music tracks. I'd love to take a listen for myself.